Sure, I would be. You can. As much as I love this place, I have been here for a very long time. So today's session looks closely at the efforts of Grenada, a small island in the Caribbean, to transition to a sustainable electrical system, something which is more complex than you might imagine, and something I think we can all imagine how complex it would be here in Newfoundland for all sorts of reasons. Before we pass things over to John, I do have some housekeeping. So today's session is being recorded, and we are also live streaming it on Zoom and YouTube. So you will be able to watch this session as a recorded session later, or you can use it in a classroom or whatever you want. We will be taking questions after Dr. Telesford's presentation. So all of you in the room, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. For those of you watching online, type your questions into a chat window or a Q&A box, and then we'll have Mandy or Kathy read questions out loud. Help yourself to some refreshments if you haven't yet, and the lunch will show up at some point after the presentation. Also, before we begin, I do want to respectfully acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of a very diverse group of indigenous nations. And we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We also encourage you, wherever you are watching us from, to reflect on these lands and those where you are located today, and to consider the indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. So before I pass things to John, I would like to introduce Bill Chislett from Marine National, who would like to say a few words. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you very much. Just a couple words just to contextualize things a little bit, why John and his colleagues are here on a cold day in January from warm Grenada. Marine Institute, for those who are not aware, we're very engaged globally. We punch well above our weight in terms of being such a small institution in terms of our international collaboration. We're engaged in all continents, and in our international strategies, we do national and regional assessments and look at where the hotbed of activities in blue economy are happening. And about 10 or 12 years ago, we did a reassessment in the Caribbean to re-engage, identified some of the very exciting things happening in Grenada, approached the government of Grenada and T.A. Marischal Community College, where John resides or works. Although he doesn't reside. And so shortly thereafter, we engaged directly with John, pursued a number of projects through the Caribbean Development Bank in the cruise industry, yachting repair, marine repair, traditional boat building, and a few other smaller projects. And then more recently secured a multi-year project with through Global Affairs Canada, which we've been now involved with for a little over 3 years pre-COVID. Mika manages the project currently. And through that project is focusing on blue economy and sustainability and building programs to graduate more individuals from Grenada and the Caribbean into oceans occupations, all built on the idea of climate resilience and sustainability. And it's through that lens and through discussions with John, we thought it'd be a really good idea to plug into this opportunity to discuss some of the very exciting things happening in Grenada. So back to you. I think you'll give a little bio and overview.
I do. Dr. John Telesford is a lecturer and associate dean in the School of Continuing Education at the T.A. Marischal Community College in Grenada, and a research associate with our friends at the Institute of Island Studies at the University of Prince Edward Island. We work a lot with that. He has also worked as an individual consultant for over 15 years in the field of sustainability, environment, and energy. Between 2019 and now, he served as a co-investigator and principal researcher for Grenada on the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council global project titled Sustainable Island. futures. We were also part as the Harris Center, and Mark was our principal investigator here for Newfoundland and Labrador, looking at something somewhat different around fiscal crisis management. It was a comparative project with Iceland. You can find all of that information on the Harris Center website. John also works closely with the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals on islands. John has published in journals such as Sustainable Development, Resources, Conservation and Recycling, Journal of Industrial Ecology, Island Studies Journal, and China Oceans Law Review. So welcome, Dr. Telesford, and take it from here.
Okay, thank you very much, Johan. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to deliver on some work that I have been doing in the Caribbean for a little bit. When I was invited to do this talk, I was a bit hesitant. Why am I coming to just maybe attend a couple of meetings at MI and I have to prepare for a talk? But I actually jumped at the opportunity because I thought it would have been it's a good idea to share some work that I've been doing. It's not published work. I must confess that it is research that I've been doing as an island researcher, just as an island, looking in at a transition process that has been taking place in Grenada over the last 10 years. So I relish the opportunity to share with you some of the information I've gathered so far and to look forward to your feedback on this somewhat partial research that I've been doing over the last 10 years. So more complex than imagined, and you note I have a question mark and exclamation mark at the end. Is it a question or is it a statement? So we'll see as we go along. You can change your slides, but it's not changing on my computer. Why is it stuck? You can check. But it's not changing here.
It's not changing on your computer.
Come on.
You could stand if you want, and then you can see the slide.
Yeah, maybe, yes, maybe you'll have to do that. Okay, so we should be the best at that. Is it okay here?
Yes.
Great. So still in 2006, I guess we're all aware that most islands in the Caribbean and other islands, we are endowed with a lot of renewable energy resources, wind, tidal, waves, solar, geothermal. And coupled with this, the smallness, there is this perception. I speak to a lot of persons on islands, especially in the Caribbean, and a lot of persons with environmental focuses that think that it's easy to transition from fossil-based fuels, or what we may call unsustainable energy resources, to more sustainable resources that we are endowed with, right? So these two aspects of islands led me to the question, is this as simple as some people are thinking? Is that transition, sustainability transition in general, is it that simple? Or is it more complex than we are actually thinking it is? Next slide. Just to indicate, to support some of this smallness approach, I just picked out a couple of islands in the Caribbean just to see what their peak demands was in 2008 to 2011. And we look at those there: Antigua and Barbuda, maximum 51 megawatts, Grenada, just about 32 megawatts demand, peak demand, St. Kitts and Nevis, about 39, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, just 24.5. So if our demands are so small, then it may be simple to just move away from fossil-based fuels to renewable energies. But is that so? Next slide, please. Right, but so what we find is that in islands, electricity, and I'm going to focus on electricity, just power, These systems that provide these small demands are very well entrenched, dynamically stable, although they are deemed to be unsustainable because of the very nature of the source of energy. So I'm using this case analysis to illuminate and to analyze the complexity associated with sustainability transitions. And this could be in general, but I'm just focusing on the electricity sector in Grenada. Lorbuck, and this long name here, available 2017, describes or defines sustainability transitions as large-scale disruptive changes in societal systems that emerge over a long period of decades. These sustainability transitions are a threat to existing dynamically stable configurations facing persistent sustainability challenges and opportunities for more radical, systemic, and accelerated change. So to conduct this analysis, I'll be using I'm not too sure if you're familiar with the multi-level perspective, is one of, is used by Giles and his colleagues to analyze and to conceptualize sustainability transitions in general. And they define the multi-level perspective as a framework for understanding these transitions, and it distinguishes three analytical levels: niches, socio-technical regimes, where's the third one? And third one, the exogenous socio-technical landscape. So these are the three aspects of the MLP: the niches, socio-technical regimes, and the exogenous socio-technical landscape. So this is a picture of the MLP. And as we see on the x-axis, these transitions will take place over time. On the y-axis, we move to more structured conceptual lenses. So the niches, innovators at the bottom here are not very structured. They're there figuring out what to do. The socio-technical regime is a dynamically stable system with all its culture, science, policy, technology. So the electricity system is such a system that is very stable. It's very parts-driven. All the cultures are there, the policies are there, and then we have the socio-technical landscape, which is outside of both the niche and the socio-technical regime. So it's like envision this like the government, right? The hierarchy, this technical landscape is not influenced much by the niches nor the socio-technical regime. So they set the next slide. You could move to the next slide. So right, they set the macroeconomic factors, the deep cultural patterns, the macro political developments, right? So those are some of the key features of the socio-technical landscape. The socio-technical regime or the system is at the meso level, somewhere in between there, the adaptation of lifestyles to technical systems. So most of us in Grenada, we are very familiar with a very stable electricity supply. We flick the switch, the lights are on. We're not aware of all the demand fluctuations that happen between the scenes. All we know is that we have a very stable supply of electricity to supply our services and needs. But we have some investments, all the generators, the infrastructure, the cables, the distribution lines, known regulations and standards. And then we have the technological niches, which are some radical innovators based on what's happening on the macro and meso level. These guys may come into play at the micro level, but they, as I said, they're not very well organized. So what I would attempt to do is to analyze and to discuss from three perspectives: policy and legal, technology, and this interesting concept that I ran into by Stevenson and et al. in 2010, something that we call energy culture. So we look into these when I get to the discussion points. Next slide. All right, so the case study. We are located just around here, right down to the south of the Caribbean, just north of Trinidad and Tobago. We're nestled by both the Atlantic Ocean and the Caribbean Sea. Small island, 3 islands, Big Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and my colleague here is from Carriacou, Mrs. Alexander, grew up on that island. Next slide. Some socio-economic and socio-ecological factors of Grenada. Population estimated in 2022, 113,000. I kind of doubt that a bit. I think we are a bit less than 113. Very small growth, and this is not unique to us. I think many islands suffer from very small population growth because of maybe high out migration. People always trying to escape what we call the island trap, looking for betterment and to move on. GDP composition, we based on service. Tourism is one of our main incomes. Very small industry and agriculture at 6.8%. Although we boast to have a pretty good agricultural sector, it is still not contributing as we expect to the GDP of the island. And in 2020, we estimated our GDP per capita at about 15,000. Just looked at the location, we are 12 degrees north, 61 west. Very small, 344 square kilometers, including Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Population density, 331 people per square kilometer. And if we look at this compared to continents, and it's pretty high. I think continents are just maybe less than 100 persons per square kilometer. Another feature of islands, they tend to have very high population densities. I think Malta is over 7,000 people per square kilometers, square kilometers. High population in the urban center or climate tropical. And again, a lot of land is categorized as agricultural land. We are just above the hurricane belt, but that has been changing. A lot of hurricanes are now creeping further south. We were hit with 2 hurricanes back to back in 2004 and 2005 after close to 50 years of no hurricanes. And as we look at the trends now, the paths are becoming more and more interesting. Next slide. Okay, so into the energy sector, our primary energy supply drives transportation and electricity for 45%, and the rest of it drives our commercial, residential, and industrial sectors. 99% of our primary energy is from fossil fuels, including liquid petroleum gas, kerosene, gasoline, diesel. Yeah, comes for a very significant percentage of our import bill. The prices are extremely volatile, and we look at that in more detail in a little while. And this high dependency results in issues of electricity, energy insecurity, affordability issues, independent issues, environmental and energy equity issues, which we will look at in a little bit again. So in 1994, a private monopoly was established in the electricity sector. And that monopoly has the right to generate, I should use because it's no different, to generate, transmit, distribute, and sell electricity up to 2023. This privatization, prior to that, there were a lot of issues with the electricity supply in Grenada. And that privatization allowed for investments into this alien company that was operated publicly. So things like brownouts and blackouts were virtually eliminated. The supply was very reliable, and we have a very high penetration rate of about 98%. So a lot of people would have access to electricity from the company. several community projects also benefited from that injection of new investment in 1994. Next slide. Customer base just about 2021, the yellow bars, 55,152 customers, categorized as domestic, commercial, and industrial. And we see that the blue bar is the highest number of customers, which will be our domestic customers, and hiding in the bottom there just about 29 industry customers. But if you look over to the right, we note that the smallest bar, the blue, is the average consumption of the domestic customer, where the highest bar being the smallest number of customers, but the average consumption is over close to 200,000 kilowatt units per year. Next slide. This is the basic rate structure. The two main charges, the fuel charge and a non-fuel charge. The fuel charge is calculated based on the CIF for importing the diesel. The non-fuel charge basically covers the operational cost of the company. Then we have two government charges, 15% of non-fuel charges after 500 kilowatts, and that's only for domestic customers. Environmental levy. Interestingly, that environmental levy is extracted from customers and sent to the Solid Waste Authority for the collection of domestic customers' garbage. And it's $370 US above 500 kilowatts. And then for the commercial customer, there is a flow charge, and for the industrial customer, there is a horsepower charge. Next slide.
I don't think that I didn't see that.
I just wanted to highlight the domestic sector because I wanted to just spend a little time later on in the analysis to speak a little bit about that. 95% of all the domestic customers that I showed you earlier use less than approximately 400 kilowatts per month or below. 43% of these customers use 100 kilowatts or less. Somebody who is using 100 kilowatts of power of electricity pays approximately $42.78 US per month. That's no environmental levy because they're using below 500, no VAT because they're using less than 500. And this sparked that question with me. How do we deal with many of these customers that I call on the margins of the electricity sector? And I will explain why I asked that question as we go along. Next. I've been mapping the impacts of the fuel rates, the crude oil prices on the international market, blue, against the fuel rate of our rate structure. And you see that there is an interesting match between the fluctuations in the price we pay for importing the diesel and the price the customers pay on the non-fuel rate, right? The other interesting observation from that on the right is that we see from since 1996 to 2022, the fuel rate has been systematically rising. Besides the fluctuations, the price is simply trending upwards, right? So that's over almost 20 years of data that is revealing that trend. And that's a very interesting observation for us in the Grenada and basically in the Caribbean, because most rate structures are based on that fact. Next slide. So, just to look at some analysis from those observations and using the multi-level perspective on the landscape level and the STS interactions, right? The relevance of the ESA, and that's on the landscape, that's where the policy is set, macro policy, came into question, right? All these fluctuations in prices, people complaining. When the price is low, everybody's happy. When the price is high, we also grand like that's the name of the company. They put up on the price and the likes. But so I just made that point, right? So we have the dips and rises, but systematically increasing fuel price. So that brought into question, is the Electricity Supply Act of 1994 still relevant? We had a World Bank project that looked at how can we change that. Only 2 countries participated, Grenada and St. Lucia. This very interesting debate between the 2 main political parties in Grenada. In one party, the Minister of Utilities and Energy was the former manager of the electricity company, and he and his party was completely opposed to the sale of the company in 1994. And we have that sorry. Right, so these 2 parties had different perspectives on how we should move forward. Of course, the Minister of Utilities here is very adamant that we should get rid of the monopoly and regain the company and the likes. And this is where we are now. The other party simply developed a national policy in 2011. And one of the policy goals was to sort of revisit the legal and regulatory framework of generating electricity in Grenada. Next slide. So all these are interactions at the landscape and ESPS interactions, right? So eventually, the government in 2015, under the Minister of Utilities and Energy, who was the former manager, decided that they would move ahead and break the monopoly. And they created a new ESA of 2016 with a new framework for accelerating the transition to renewable energy. And here is the crux of where the thinking came from for this talk. A new public utilities regulatory commission was put in place, and a hole was drilled in the STS, really, which sparked a legal buyback by the government of private companies. So that's where we are now. The new ESA brought into play something that a lot of us were not aware of. Well, I was aware, but maybe the average Grenadian was not aware. There was something that they called the purchase agreement that came along with the ESA of 1994. And it says that once the ESA 1994 is broken, the government has to buy back the company. And so now we are basically a public monopoly, right? Publicly owned by the government of Grenada. So next slide. So basically what has happened here, the socio-technical landscape created the ESA 2016, and this drilled this hole here in this stable STS that were used to over the years, right? So that's basically where we are. Next slide. So what has happened on the company side, as I said, the company was bought back, so it's now brackets of public monopoly. Interconnection policy, there was an interconnection policy that was established by the company when it was privately owned. That has now moved on to the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. And because of that transition, we've seen a slow uptake of renewable energies by mostly commercial and some domestic customers. And there's a new pilot net billing program that is in place. We previously had a net metering program. Now we're looking at the net billing program. At the innovative level, new contractors for the design and installation of solar PV have emerged in little spots over the place. And our college have also latched onto the opportunity to start training persons in PV technologies, install, design, and the likes. Next slide. So as I previously said, this is just a picture of what was happening with PV uptake from 2007. We see here that we had a peak in 2019, and now 2021, a very drastic drop. And that's because of that transition period where the monopoly was broken. People are now in a bit of a frenzy as to what should I do, how should I move forward. So we saw that drop in the uptake of PV systems. Next slide. On the technology side, fossil-based fuels, as we know, provide very stable baseload generation. So as our peaks and so on, our demands fluctuate, we don't feel it as a customer. So very, very stable. We have some RE technologies, wind and power, are not able to provide baseload because of the intermittent nature. When the sun disappears, the generation might drop. When the wind drops, the wind stops spinning and so on. The cost is still, at least in our neck of the woods, a bit prohibitive for the average customer. And this is where it comes in with our domestic customers. We go to the energy policy piece in a little bit. New technologies, wave and tidal, I think is coming in, but still many of them in prototypes and still looking at validation projects around the world. We are planning to have a 15 megawatt plant, geothermal plant by 2030. Grenada is very highly endowed with geothermal energy. Grenada, St. Vincent, Dominica, and those smaller volcanic islands, very highly endowed. But again, geothermal is quite similar to oil exploration. We have to drill wells, we have to do the proofing, and it's very, very expensive. And that project has been going on now for close to 10 years since that transition period. So that's basically some of the aspects that I've observed on the technology side. And on the last piece, next slide, culture. Right, this is where I want to kind of focus my sort of research, looking at these 50,000 people as domestic customers. How do they feel in this whole transition process? We normally would look at the big industries. We want to put the base load back in 15 megawatts of geothermal. But these people, as I say, maybe on the margins of this discussion, how do we actually deal with them? And I kind of looking at that, the energy culture framework proposed by Stevenson and colleagues, which speaks to the consumer energy behavior can be understood at its most fundamental level by examining the interactions between the cognitive norms of the consumer, the beliefs and the understandings as the material culture, the technologies that they have to use, the buildings that they live in, and so on, and how do they deal with the energy consumption, the energy practices. So they're proposing this interaction between these three concepts as to how the average customer, it could be a commercial customer also, but I would like to focus on the domestic customer, how they would actually behave in this transition period, right? So as you see the material culture, we look at things as your household income, the regulations that are in place, the technologies available, right? Your educational level, your upbringing, your demographics, the cognitive norms. So many of us are very familiar with the stability of the electricity sector. Are we able to maybe put a RE system in place and have to monitor the sun movement and the load aspects of the ability of this PV system to generate, right? So next slide. Right, so these are some of the questions we may need to consider. On the material cultural side, who can afford PV solar, even if the regulations allow for ease of interconnection? Are the technologies readily available and affordable? I remember in one consultation, people looking at, okay, yes, we're gonna bring the prices down, we would have tax exempts, but the average man still be able to purchase at least one solar panel and put on his house. I'm only consuming 100 watts of power. My income is just this much, right? So these are some of the issues that come to mind when I look at this transition period. How do I practice? Subsidies for RE may favor the rich, as they may be better able to afford the investment cost of RE. Would environmental concerns drive these investments in renewable energy at the domestic customer base? Is the average man thinking really of environmental concerns? I'm very concerned about putting on the lights, making sure that my kid has lights so to study in the night, that my refrigerator can keep my food, preserved. Maybe I have a little TV with some entertainment. That might be my concern. I'm not too sure that I'm emitting too much carbon dioxide into the air to be concerned, right? And some of the cognitive norms and so on. We have use stable, reliable electricity supply. That's ingrained in me. So if I move off the grid and I have a PV system on my house, and the sun disappears, or I size it for a load with one TV, a refrigerator, 2 bulbs, and then all of a sudden I bring in, my son brings in a new TV, or my son decides I'm going to put a new bed, a new refrigerator in it. The load goes up, the system becomes irrelevant, right? And you have to reinvest and expand, right? So those are some of the questions and thoughts that I'm bringing forward from this this transition period. So finally, some key thoughts for discussion and maybe just for replication in other islands. Political will, policy directives and legal changes can set the stage for sustainability transition, as I indicated with that blue crack in the STS. But technology uptake and diffusion must be carefully considered, moving beyond demonstration projects. The optimum mix of technologies must be also carefully thought out. Energy transitions must be just and the priority given to the energy impoverished, those people at the margins, who may be at the margins of the sector. As with the uptake of REs, they can still remain at a state of energy impoverishment. The temporal scale and expectations for sustainable transitions must also be carefully managed. Thank you.
So our lunch will be here at 1. At 20 minutes for questions. If you are online, please type your questions in a chat box or in the Q&A box, and Mandy will read them out loud. And if you're in the room, just raise your hand. So who wants to go first?
Yours looked like there was one on the chat. Or was some kind of comment on the chat.
Do we have anything online?
Sorry,
Do we have anything online?
would you like to see it?
You can just read it.
Look up. I guess we do. We have a question online. Most of the energy use is by industrial users. What industries are these, and what opportunities are there to encourage sustainable energy sources, perhaps even operate off grid?
Yes, so what type of industries we have in Grenada? We have bottling companies, there is a beer manufacturer, there's a paint manufacturer, there's a flour mill, a number of bottling companies, Coca-Cola, the Grenada breweries, anything else?
The rum factory.
There's a rum distillery. So it's yeah, that's about some of the major industries that we do have there. The opportunities for energy sustainability, is it? As I said, I think there's a not regulation, but tax incentives that are being attempted for persons to invest in renewable energy. As I said, although we do have some of these incentives, I think on PV panels, I think it's zero rated for import. Yeah. The cost is still a bit high for the ordinary customer. Commercial customers, many of the customers that I showed on that slide that were actually taking up renewable energy, they were mostly commercial customers, not many domestic customers. The new ESA of 2016 has now opened up the way for persons to do off-grid, the self-generation. So yes, that is also a possibility. But again, it's the investment cost. So yes, the opportunity is there for self-generation. That was not part of the previous Electricity Supply Act of 1994. So that is also in this new transition period.
You mentioned metering policy, and I was wondering if you could explain what the old system one was, what was wrong with it, what is the new initiative, and how does that work?
Yeah, sure. So previously there was a net billing process. So the customer would generate his electricity, but they would do a net bill with the company. So he connected to the grid. He's not allowed to use his energy. He sells it to the grid. So yeah, he's paid by the company, I think, price that is much less than what he pays to the company for electricity. So previously there was the net billing, which, as you would see, was quite prohibitive to the customer. Why should I generate my energy, sell it for a lesser price to the company, and then have to pay the company more for what they give me, right? So that was a kind of crazy thing. So now we're moving to the net metering, where the customer is allowed to use his own generation and sell the excess. So this is yet to see, we're yet to see how this is going to pan out and help with these things. And that is now regulated by the Public Regulatory Commission, that interconnection policy. So that in essence is the difference thing. Yep. Yes.
That's my only questions. It says, Dear John, Nick Mercer writing you, your colleague at the Institute of Science.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Nick. Hi, Laurie.
It's fascinating analysis. Thank you. There are many remote islands, off-grid areas in Newfoundland and Labrador that are exclusively reliant on diesel generation. One of the primary issues here is that the loads are so tiny, so less than 500 kilowatts. The variable renewables risk harming the diesel equipment. One answer is to focus on household energy efficiency as opposed to supply side solutions like wind and solar. Given the small household loads in Grenada, are there any serious efforts to encourage energy efficiency? What forms do these practices take?
Good, very good question, Nick. Thanks for that question. Energy efficiency is very, 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 very critical to assist with that transition period. And yes, in Grenada, there are a number of initiatives. I'm not too sure that we have anything on the household level, but I know at the commercial level and the RAC sector, refrigeration and air conditioning sector, there is a green cooling strategy where high efficiency air conditioning systems are encouraged and now imported for installation and assisting customers with using being more energy efficient. Thinking back to the domestic sector, we do have now a high intake of importation of LEDs. And one of the things there though is the comparative prices compared to your small compact fluorescents, and so it's still a little bit, the differences there are still high, but a lot of customers are now moving into the use of LEDs. I speak here as somebody who is very keen in the energy sector, and I still use the compact fluorescent bulbs. I'm not going to change them out until they're spent. So only when they're blown, I will replace them with LEDs, because the prices are still a bit, the difference in prices are still quite And moving from compacts to LEDs, the difference in price for a full change out does not really equate to much energy efficiency difference, if you understand what I'm saying. So if I pay $100 to move all my bulbs, I may just get a 10% increase in energy efficiency. So I advise customers that you just take your time and transition to LEDs as the bulbs go. So that way you buy them one at a time, two at a time, you don't have a big outlay, right? And yeah, so the initiatives that I'm aware of would be mostly with the commercial sector, the Ministry of Energy. I don't think we have any focus energy efficiency commercials or encouragement or so. Commodore, may you want to say something here?
Yeah, so the electricity company, Greenlink, they do put out some promos as to trying to inform the locals as to how they could improve the efficiencies, as in how to do when best to do your laundry, how to approach your lights to off. So they do have this little notices that they put out to encourage people to use electricity in a more sustainable manner.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing about the energy company, and we were having a little drink at a bar, and I was talking to one of the guys in the electricity company. And he was saying to me, he said, their company, well, we encourage you to use less electricity and so on. But as soon as they notice that your bills are going up, your house, they figure out, well, what are you doing? Is the meter working? Are you messing around with the meter? So it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky dealing with these companies. You know, they encourage you to reduce your electricity consumption, save on this, do this. As soon as they notice, oh no, John's bill was 100, 100 is down to 50. Why is it down to 50? 50 minutes. So you visit you, so John, what's happening here? Let's check your meter. Is your meter okay? Yeah, so that was just a little joke on the side. But yes, thanks, Clement.
More questions?
I have a question. Sorry. Is there an expectation or a commitment that the diesel generators will be removed from service, I guess, at some point in the future? Or is there a continued role, I guess, for?
I think there will be. From Grenada's perspective, I can answer that question this way. About 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was an issue with one of their generators and they replaced it with a brand new diesel generator. So that's an indication as to, yes, I think diesel will be playing a role in the energy mix in the future. I have this saying that we did not move out of the Stone Age because of the lack of stones. So we may be transitioning out of fossil fuels, not because of the lack of fossil fuels, but I can see it playing a more minimized role, especially in island settings, where our emissions are very minuscule and where our economies are transitioning and developing and moving forward. So we'd have to find the right mix, that sweet sustainability point, as I call it, where we find that right mix for electricity generation. Yes,
and I think that leads, like my question was also kind of about the diesel in the mix. It seems like that is a really central part of the electricity mix. So in terms of the energy culture dimension, like you said, like it's really hard to convince people cognitively to trade a lower carbon footprint, which feels very abstract and hypothetical, for stability and reliability. So is there more of a cultural framing that might be more effective around diesel and air quality, or is the air quality issues not that prevalent with diesel? And I think related to that, I guess I'd say, like, if air quality is an issue, does that maybe also get into some thinking about like tourism destination image for the region and stuff like that? You kind of want cleaner local air quality, and that might be, from a cultural politics, a more effective way of selling it than, you know, this kind of more abstract
climate change. No, it's a good way of looking at it, but diesel and air quality in Grenada, I don't know that we can. That's not a major.
It's not like the emissions aren't visible enough.
I think the cultural aspect of it, I think I see mostly is the customer being very familiar with that stable electricity supply.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
I think that's one of, yeah. We have the environmental issues. We have customers who are aware that, yes, diesel would be emitting carbon dioxide, and yes, but is it enough for them to say, well, okay, I need to make that transition? I'm not sure. And this is where I want to go deeper with my research. I was trying to get some funding, but have not been successful. But just to fill out those 40,000 customers on that whole energy cultural framework and see what they're actually thinking, what is shaping your energy culture.
Right.
You know, what are the key aspects, you know, that's shaping that energy culture. So yeah.
Does the regulatory regime in Grenada set any renewable energy targets that the utility has to meet? No,
we don't have targets thus far. The utility company prior, when the earth began to shake below their feet, they started to do their own targeting. So they did a lot of investments in renewable. We had that target 20%
by 2020.
By 2020, but we know in 2023. So yeah, we do have some of these, but it's just percentages that we fantasize over sometimes. That's how I put it. But we are at 20% by 2020. So that's in the past. Yeah. But I know that the Regulatory Commission, they are working towards these, putting these hard fast goals and so in place so that we can start looking at how we make the transition more meaningful.
Man, do we have a question online?
Yes, I've got a couple online. First, Laurie's, this one from your other colleague. It says, hi, John. Laurie's sitting next to Nick and how is the public reacting to these initiatives? If they're not using much electricity to begin with, how invested are they in changing? Are there plans for public engagement to bring people on side? For example, changing attitudes? And what are the timelines in place?
Public reaction. I have 1, 2, 3 of my colleagues from Grenada. I mean, I can't get public reaction from them. People are generally, I think, one of the biggest drivers, I think, for change is the price. I think we were having a discussion last night when we were eating and we were all looking at our electricity bills and the rise in price over a period of time. I think that's one of the biggest drivers for change. The interesting thing about that is that once the price goes down, everybody's happy again. So it's a sort of a roller coaster type of approach. What was the second aspect of the?
Are there plans for public engagement to bring people on side?
Right, public engagement. I'm not too sure what the government has up its sleeves, so I would not be able to say. I know that the Ministry of Energy will speak from time to time on engaging the public on different projects and different issues, but that we have a consistent public engagement program, no, that is not happening at this particular time.
I've got another question.
Sure, go for it.
So it says, with the government now owning the electrical company by changing the law, is there now a disincentive for private companies to invest in the area through non-utility generation?
I'm not too sure what the private industry would be thinking. But I think, again, the investments there are driven based on the private investors' perception of how much it's costing him to do what they do. So I am not too sure if the ownership of the company would make much of a difference. The rate structure remains the same. The prices are heavily contingent on the price that we pay for the importation of diesel. So investments, the cost of manufacturing is extremely high because of those high prices. It becomes better when the prices go down. So the investors would be looking to me from that price perspective, that cost to me perspective. I don't think that any of the industrial players in Grenada invested in renewable energy over the last 10 to 15 years. from just my observation, not the flour mill, systems, no, the breweries, no. So I'm not too sure that whether it's government owned or privately owned, that would really affect the investment levels by the industries and the commercial sector. Yes, there are a number of commercial persons who actually, entities who actually invested. But now that we have the new net metering system, we're yet to see if this is going to change the landscape. So that's my next 5-year observation.
Any other questions? If you need a minute, we can ask them to bring the lunch in while you're thinking of your question.
That's my question. What is the lunch? Right.
There is another question online.
There is no.
Okay.
Yeah. Someone asked, is there opportunity to replace or upgrade old diesel to newer, more efficient units?
With geothermal, the plan with the geothermal plant is to actually do a central plant that will be run by geothermal. There's a lot of talk about upgrading to natural gas, which would be a natural step to geothermal. But as I mentioned earlier, the last replacement that we did on a diesel plant was actually a diesel. So it's very difficult to judge where these investments will be going.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Lunch is getting brought in. We'll wrap up the session, but you can by all means continue the presentation in the room. Before we do that, just to let you know that this session will be recorded and available on the Tariff Center website, so you can look at it later. And a few thank yous to all of you, to Mika and Kathy and the Tariff Center team and Mandy for pulling this off on a short notice. And of course, to John for the presentation and the interesting discussion. Thank you.